Thank you very much, and I'm just going to swiftly invite Elizabeth.
Well, thank you too. As a local person living in Nottingham, I'm really honoured and delighted and thrilled to be taking part in such an interesting contribution to our culture here in Nottingham, and Disgust seems to work very well, I think, as a cultural contribution. So thank you very much. Now, in the critique of judgment, Kant, and I'm going to be talking about literature, which is, of course, much less immediately in your face than the visual performances we've just been hearing about. So, in the critique of judgment, Kant inadvertently provides an explanation for the aesthetic power of disgust. The disgusting, he says, destroys aesthetic distance. It impacts too closely on the senses, so that the repulsive object in representation arouses the same disgust as in reality. Accordingly, a disgusting representation cannot be beautiful or a work of art at all. And you'll find a much clearer account of this in Katie Jones's book on page 1, starts with Kant. Around the time of the First World War, Dada and other avant-garde movements aimed to do away with this boundary Kant deemed so essential between art and life, representation and reality. Beauty ceased to be the primary aesthetic value, and the disgusting became a weapon designed to shock the public into recognition of the horror of war, the cruelties of the social order, the irrationality of human nature, and the beauty of the urinal. Now, Otto Dix's The Match Seller includes bits of real banknotes and newspaper, so up to a point transgressing the image-reality boundary. Damien Hirst's Let's Eat Outside Today goes further with its real rotting meat and real flies. Self-evidently, the disgusting elicits disgust. But disgust is neighbour to other effects. The match seller's dismembered body arouses a first visceral shrinking. The dachshund piddling on an amputee's stumps is an image that says, "Laugh if you dare." But disgust, then moral outrage, is surely the response of most viewers to Dix's bleak picture of social indifference to blighted bodies and lives. By contrast, when I saw Hirst's rotting barbecue at the Royal Academy, sickly grins and the odd strangled chuckle seemed to be the common response of sophisticates inwardly wishing they were looking at Déjeuner sur l'herbe. Theorists tend to define disgust relative to neighbouring aversive or pleasurable effects, such as horror on the one hand or lust on the other. A recent book by Caroline Korsmeier, Savouring Disgust, undoes Kant's claim. The disgusting can be beautiful and a lot else as well. Disgust is partly instinctual. Compared with other aversive effects, it's the most visceral. Even moral disgust retains a shadow of physical shock, as in Dix's painting. But as Korsmeier argues, disgust is highly culture-dependent. Food disgust, for example, is universal, but what foods disgust is culture-dependent. It is also culture-generating. It can either sustain or transgressively challenge social norms. If disgust is at once culture-dependent and culture-generating, then whose disgust gets to prevail? Who are the arbiters of taste, and who and what the abject objects of disgust? In art and literature, the disgusting may reproduce or may challenge the status quo, may be conservative or radically transgressive, or quite a range of effects. And this is what I want to consider, taking Karen Duve, the German author's novel Rain, as an example. Rain transmits a feminist-inflected green agenda and an attack on contemporary body culture, the illnesses it causes, and on sexual violence as the ultimate assertion of male dominance. But the critique is mediated through a blackly comic gamut of disgusting motifs, some tending more towards the outrageous or the horrific, others towards the comically erotic. Besides quotes, I'm going to show a few female nudes by the Austrian artist Maria Lasnik. Her assertively unfashionable bodies resonate with Duve's novel, I feel, where bodies are a battlefield of cultural power struggles. I gave a similar paper last summer for a German-speaking public, so my quotes are partly start off in German, but I've given them also in English. I hope that won't be confusing. Now, first a few words about the phenomenology of disgust. Before Korsmeyer's study came out, I was already a fan of Aurel Kolnay, whom Korsmeyer also draws on. In his 1929 essay on disgust, Kolnay emphasises what he calls the So-Sein, how disgusting things present themselves, how they seem or appear. So aesthetics in the original meaning of having to do with sense perception. Kolnay and the chicken look oddly alike to me, and I think Duve as well. And I'm really pleased to see such a happy chicken after Penny, what was it called? Penny Jenny, or the horror there. And Duve is very much concerned with animals. She was very into animal rights too. Anyway, Kolnay's approach doesn't just look like the chicken, but he also is a good match for Duve, I think. Kolnay contrasts visceral disgust with the existential quality of fear. With fear, it's the sheer existence of the thing that matters, what Kolnay calls Dasein, often something unknown or not present to us. But the disgusting has a challenging proximity. The disgusting object grins and smirks and stinks menacingly at us, he says. The sensual intimacy of the encounter induces fascination. We look more attentively, and so the ambivalence inherent in disgust unfolds. Kolnay emphasises the sliding boundary between disgust and lust or desire, and to desire I'd add curiosity. In German, Gier and Begierde mean desire for food or sex. Neugier or Neugierde mean curiosity, literally desire for the new. And disgust turning to curiosity has surely played a huge role in the evolution of human cultures, whether dietary or sexual, or how we treat the environment generally. Ambivalence extends also to the object. Kolnay stresses organic processes that mingle life and death. The prototypical object of disgust, he says, is putrefaction, and associated with the extinction of life, a certain quite remarkable augmentation of life. And you think of Hirst's flies laying eggs and dying in heaps. And it's the fertility as much as the putrefaction that disgusts. All fecundity is simply disgusting, as Otto Weininger manfully asserts. One need only think of the association with vermin of internal sprouting and breeding, which points to decay on a massive scale. Kolnay emphasises the lower senses of taste, touch and smell. If taste is more intimate, smell is more inescapable. And for Freud, too, smell was crucial. Inside upright human beings, snuffling four-legged creatures are struggling to get out. As for touch, slimy viscosity, sticky contagion, formless stuff that flows across boundaries, these are the So-Sein of the disgusting. Sartre, too, follows Weininger, and de Beauvoir follows Sartre. Le visqueux, the viscous, is disgusting, and it's feminine or feminizing. By extension, the decay of form, shape, and of mental categories induces disgust or nausea. Collapsing grammar, as much as collapsing morals, enrages disgusted of Tunbridge Wells, disgusted of Paris, values masculine being but finds feminine nothingness nauseating. Cognized primary theme, then, is life mixed with death and putrefaction. Life begins and ends in slime. And slime is the very feel of ambiguity. Neither clearly wet nor dry, slimy body parts are neither clearly inside nor outside. And of course, the bringing out of the slimy innards is peculiarly disgusting. Metaphorically, slithery slime undoes those hard either-or oppositions of dogmatic discourse, and this disgusts. Male-female is perhaps the foundational either-or. Now, Colnagh takes little explicit account of sexual difference. Duve, by contrast, explores gendered power relations. Rain is a novel about disgust. All the characters feel disgust, shading into fear, horror or anger on the one hand, outrage, and curiosity, pleasure, even ecstasy on the other. We see at one point or another through the eyes of all the characters, including a bucket load of traumatised garden slugs, and the dog Noah, who understands power hierarchies better than the humans do. This gives rise to darkly comic irony, but also solicits, ultimately, ethical discrimination between disgusting pleasures to be savoured and self-disgust and other damaging aversions to be overcome. Rain offers a richly varied tasting menu of the disgusting. I've selected a few choice items: a bloated female corpse, a fat woman's pre- and post-coital body, a thin woman being violently raped, blocked drains, slugs massacred en masse, and a woman swallowing a single slug, a fat man drowning in mud. Beyond immediate visceral reactions, a metaphoric network of linked motifs generates critical reflection. Evil flourishes in the damp. That's the third of the mottos heading the novel. The discourse of sexual difference allocates dampness unequally between the sexes. The phallus signifies clear, clean boundaries between self and other, but the soggy morass of woman's body is a key site of taboos policed by disgust as the gatekeeper emotion, as one critic has called it. Rain starts with a putrefying female corpse. Leon and his new wife Martina are en route to a remote cottage in post-unification East Germany. Leon wants to live close to nature and write. He's got a commission to ghost the biography of a Hamburg pimp and gangster. They stop in a lay-by. After sliding down a muddy path to have a pee, Leon finds the swollen corpse of a woman floating in the river. Disgust modulates into fascinated curiosity. "What were you holding that stick for?" Martina asks afterwards. He shrugged his shoulders. He would rather not explain that he had used the stick to push the dead woman's arm under the water and watch it drift up again, and to find out whether the skin would tear if he prodded it. It didn't. Like drowned Ophelia for the pre-Raphaelites, the water corpse is a key motif in German literature. In one poem by Gottfried Benn, water rats give birth inside a drowned girl's body, and crabs have eaten away her mouth. Women, like rats, give birth and moulder. Men write poems that transform mortal matter into immortal words. I've leapt ahead to my most disgusting image. I'm not there yet. The novel ends with another corpse when two little boys poke sticks into a dead animal washed up Oh, how do I go back? Where am I? That's it, I think. Two little boys poke sticks into a dead animal washed up on the beach. It's the second quote. Come away from that, their mother said. It's disgusting. The father looked at the animal's curiously cucumber-shaped head with the wire wrapped around it and at its bloated and partly decomposed torso. He poked a stick, poked the body with it. He just had to know if the skin would tear. It did. Curiosity starts in childhood before the taboos are fixed and is the moving force that drives history. Curious little boys will grow up to be homo faber, making scientific discoveries, technological inventions and driving machinery. Leon drives the car. Beautiful Martina wears a suede miniskirt and has eyes like a frightened deer. And I thought that Lasnig's motorbike woman usefully subverts this kind of gender stereotype. Rain draws obscene parallels between poking through skin into corpses and other kinds of poking. Martina secretly stuffs herself with a fridge load of food, then kneels over the loo, poking a finger down her throat, inducing long strings of saliva and vomit. A penis-penetrating mouth, vagina and anus during a violent rape, and a consequent mess of excrement on thighs, all this is described in similar language to poking around in blocked drains to remove slimy lumps of hair and other nameless items. Then there's the squelchy mud gurgling through nostrils and mouth into lungs as the hero Leon drowns in the marsh. And I put in the slice of watermelon in the woman's mouth, which I find a bit disturbing. You can almost hear the slurping going on. The dog Noah, his bodily integrity is also undone. He gets his ear torn off by a Rottweiler called Boxer, and Boxer's rotting head on the beach at the end looks like cucumber. Leon and his nasty pal Harry, who will later rape Martina, watch a TV film of Komodo dragons ripping a screaming deer apart. And you remember Martina has frightened deer-like eyes. For the reader, it's the pleasure the two men take in the bloody spectacle that disgusts. But what disgusts the two men and arouses them sexually is when a woman zoologist kisses the lizard on its drooling snout. Leon is later revolted when Martina lingeringly massages Noah the dog's furry muscled back to the mutual pleasure of dog and animal. Lasnig sleeping with a tiger celebrates cross-species pleasure that would surely have disgusted Leon. Disgust turning into curiosity or lust inhabits unstable borderlands surrounding birth, sex and death, and between nature and culture, animals and humans, ambiguous gender identities, transvestism and lesbian love figure. Borderlands are a pervasive metaphor. Leon and Martina's house stands on the edge of a soggy moorland full of creepy crawlies. The house is rising damp, the gardens plagued by slugs. Leon is a post-Diluvian hero who is trying to re-establish Jehovah's clean separation of land and water, hence the scandal of marshlands and slimy slugs. Leviticus 11 issues lists of dietary proscriptions of creeping and reptilic things like lizard or snail. But Leon fails to drain his land, protect his woman, or even get rid of the slugs. He does try. He drives off with whole pailfuls from the garden and tips them out in the same lay-by where he found the corpse. But at that very moment, a lorry drives across the heaving heap, spraying Leon with messy mush. Leon was not a pretty sight. Brick-red bits of slug were stuck all over his face and his jacket. A piece of black slug intestine hung from his right eyebrow. After an argument with the driver, Leon goes back to inspect the damage. It was a positive massacre. The few survivors were moving away from the scene of the accident very slowly, their feelers testing the lie of the land in all directions. They appeared to be in shock. And the parallel with human warfare or technological disaster is funny, yet gruesome, ultimately. Besides the Bible, Rain also engages with classical myth and the sirens episode in Horkheimer Adorno's Dialectic of Enlightenment. Tied to the phallic mast, Odysseus, archetypal hero of Western civilization, sails on past, leaving behind the bird women, half immersed in the lottery element. The episode conveys erotic repression in the service of phallic mastery over nature. The sirens in Rain, in Duve's Rain, are the nearest neighbours, a very fat Isadora who bathes naked in the mud and seductively swallows a slug, it's really revolting, during foreplay with Leon. This is one of her seductive moves. Her sister, gauntly skinny Kay, is consumed by hopeless love for Martina. Kay is a female homo faber, good at technology and machines. Unlike Odysseus bound to his mast, Leon succumbs to the siren lure of Isadora's billowing flesh. It was a repulsive sight, but in the darkest corner of his subconscious mind, where no ray of civilized light had ever fallen, he wanted this woman. She felt extraordinarily soft, like porridge, like uncooked cake. Heavens, when did he last run a finger round a bowl of uncooked cake? It must have been when he was a child. He burrowed in. It was like sleeping with the whole of the marshes, as if the bog and the peat and the rotten leaves and pimply fungi and all the little creeping creatures and everything else crawling and excreting and procreating, the tadpoles and spawn, the endless rain dissolving everything, caught and held in the marshes, as if all of that had become a single woman. But then comes post-coital revulsion. All that flesh, Gulliver in Brobdingnag, what he felt now was definitely not satisfaction. "Get dressed," said Leon. "Oh, how unloving," complained Isadora, stretching on her back like a fat cat and releasing a cloud of sexual odour from between her thighs. 300 million sperm cells on their way through vaginal fluid to the egg. A body without any muscles, like a white slug. All women were like that, really. But Leon is punished for such horror of life. Depressed by his failure as a writer and a man, he starts overeating and gets fatter and fatter himself. Near the end, he gets lost in the marshes. Sighing, he gave himself up to that damp embrace. Immediately the mud burst into his lungs with fierce pain. At last he lost consciousness, and Leon left the body in which he had never really felt at home for 38 years. All that was left was darkness and a fat corpse with a belt of a dressing gown round its neck. Martina, too, has not felt at home in her body ever since her father found her at age 12 in the back of an old car performing fellatio on a schoolmate. Swallowing a slug comes to mind. Bulimic Martina feels disgust of female flesh. She vomits to sustain a slim, boyish shape. After the rape, Harry strokes Martina on the head and praises her beauty, but Martina no longer cares in whose eyes she is beautiful. In the manner of a strip cartoon, the sisters, Isadora and Kay, helped by Noah, the dog, come to the rescue. Kay acts as a human salamander, wielding a flame-throwing apparatus used to dry out damp. Rapist Harry's repulsive plastic Mickey Mouse tie melts, causing his hand and face to stick together. The women bury Harry in a water hole. Leon drowns in a mud hole, and Martina starts a new life. That Leon, the writer so fascinated by a female water corpse, himself ends up as a mud corpse is profoundly satisfying. To sum up, I've emphasised here the funnier aspects. To have the more tending towards outrage and horror, I would have had to talk much more about the rape, where the disgusting really becomes very horrific. But summing up, Rain travesties myths of origin. It revalues slimy things and regenders heroism, awarding victory to the woman and Noah the dog. Duve's aesthetics of disgust are a weapon in a fight back against the long history of male-authored representations of female bodies. Thank you. We do have time. Yes, right.
Thank you for that. That was fascinating. When you were talking, I was reminded of an early story by Thomas Mann called Black Swan, and the way in which the woman in Black Swan, her daughter, becomes disgusted on her behalf, and the way in which her death is kind of precipitated by her sexual awakening and her kind of repulsion at her own body. And that reminded me of another story by Thomas Mann called Small Lizzie, I think, or Little Lizzie, about the woman who humiliates her husband and he dies through that kind of sexual awakening. Which then reminded me that there is a film called Black Swan, which is about daughters and mothers and borrowed disgust and ballet and performance.
Yes.
Would you comment on my process of association?
Well, Thomas Mann's early work came in the period generally called decadence. It was the age of cultural decadence throughout Europe and Paris, Germany, London too, I guess, with Oscar Wilde and so on. And I was interested in Mann's aesthetics of disgust and what I see as a real transformation that happens in his, at the time of the First World War, where this playful, decadent game with the disgusting is really transmuted by having to take account of what had happened in the war. And I've written about how I think the decadent fascination with disgust gives way really to an ethical consideration where the disgusting images of illness and disease in the mad trench warfare, and you can just pick out all these parallels, but the aesthetic of disgust is exceedingly powerful in this way, in enabling an oblique and indirect attack on the horror of war. I can't talk about the film The Black Swan to my disgust. I haven't yet seen it, I'm sorry, so I can't say anything about that. But certainly this shift from the 1890s to the 1920s, I think, is a really serious shift in the value of the disgusting, as in Dix's picture was intended just to illustrate that. Thank you. Right. Sorry, yeah.
I was wondering about the metaphors of woman in the novel that you've written about, and I wondered if you could say something about. I'm just interested in how I'm thinking of Irigori and how she talks about how metaphors of woman appear in culture but are repressed, so maybe in philosophy, psychoanalysis and broader culture. I'm just wondering, what's the sort of political game being played, if you like? Because here it's not, the disgust isn't, I'm probably answering my own question, but the disgust element isn't being rejected, is it? It's not saying that, I don't know, it seems that it's playing into that cultural, disgust of women's bodies. It's not refuting or rejecting it. Do you read it as heavily ironic, or, what's the sort of political angle that does that make sense?
Yes, no, I get what you're saying. Obviously, there's the danger in playing with the notion of how disgusting this morass of the woman's body, as I put it myself, is that you simply reinforce that. But the novel, I think, very wittily conveys how disgust turns to lust. And I think that she's also drawing on something which goes beyond feminist debate, that the degree to which sex is difficult, a difficult negotiation. And you cannot simply do away with cultural effects that go back for centuries, forever really, in our relations and feelings about our bodies. And so what she offers, I think, is a negotiation of the different feelings, and also drawing out the degree to which disgust is simply ambivalent, how it can either, I think that came out in the last paper a bit as well, it can either slide towards desire. It works better saying lust or disgust, in the German Lust in Freud, for example. And so the problem is to enjoy disgust and finally perhaps overcome it, if you will, but certainly to enjoy disgusting food like oysters or whatever, the sliminess, not to deny it, because to repress these feelings of disgust is not necessarily the best way to change a culture which does render abject so much about the female body. And I think this is just a huge, big debate that goes on, particularly in feminism, of course, on how best to deal with the complexities, really, of our feelings about our bodies and other people's bodies. That's not answered your question, I'm sure. But and I think what Duve, I think, does very well is really to single out disgust, to be welcomed and enjoyed, to come to enjoy something which is thought of as disgusting, but equally to really come to utterly reject damaging disgust, which is, which takes the form of self-disgust and is really damaging to the subject. And she doesn't play all the one way or all the other. It's just this complexity of disgust as an effect, which she brings out very well, I think.